afternoon. Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you have joined me today. And do you hear that wonderful music playing? Yes, it's bagpipes. And it is a Scottish holiday this week, a national holiday called Robert Burns Day. And so I thought we would celebrate. I've got the bagpipes playing, and I have a wonderful tea table here to show you. I got these flowers just for all of you, and I thought it's a promise of spring, which will be here in just a little over 50 days, I think. And the purple is for Scotland, remembering the heather and the thistle. Purple is a very Scottish color. They use it in many of their jewels. They have wonderful jewels. And I am wearing actually a pin today. I think I'm going to put these flowers here, if that's all right. And I also have pussy willows here for you behind me. But I am wearing a Scottish brooch, and it's a very famous Celtic design. You've probably seen them on, people wear them on their kilts, men and women. It's very authentic. It's a stone. I bought this in Scotland years and years ago, and it's a brown stone, and they often have brown stones and purple stones. And I just thought it would be so nice to have a little celebration for Scotland today. And do you have your tea yet? If not, pause, and I will be here. And I have a beautiful set here today from Scotland, and I think I've used this before on the Tea Talk, but I have a different creamer, and I'll show it to you. You see, it's the thistle pattern, and it is made in Scotland, Buchanan. I don't know if they are still making this or not. I got this so many years ago that it was part of our wedding china that we got from a little shop downtown Seattle called The Rose and the Thistle. And so this pot, I've never had a pot like this. It's in the shape of an Aladdin's lamp. Isn't that nice? And let's pour out. Let's see if we can do this. This pot is a little heavy. Stoneware, it's stoneware made in Scotland, and stoneware is a little heavier than china, you know? And let's have a little cream here. Here's the creamer. It's actually going to be a little milk. I like milk, and this is the thistle is on that little creamer. I don't take sugar, but I always put it on the tray in case, and that's the little sugar bowl, and it has a little jeweled spoon in it. So, should we taste? That's a full cup I have. Oh, wonderful. Oh, this is so good today. It is so beautiful out today, but so cold. Now, I must show you what I chose for your treat. And I know we have to pretend, and I wish you were here with me, but for Scotland, I chose the Scotch shortbread. And these are the real Scottish shortbread made in Scotland. And you've all seen them in the tins. They're the Walker's shortbread. But I have a very old tin that they don't make anymore. And that is the picture of Flora MacDonald and Bonnie Prince Charlie. And we're going to talk about that story today a little bit. It happened far up north on the Isle of Skye. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Robert Burns. You know who he is. He is the poet of Scotland, and he wrote the most beautiful poetry. And one of his famous poems, My Heart is in the Highlands, and he is looked to as their poet laureate forever. He actually lived in a very humble house, and I actually visited his house when I was in Scotland. It's in the little town there's a area called Ayrshire, A-Y-E-R, Shire, Ayr, and it's in the southwest portion of Scotland, not far from Edinburgh, and that's where my great-grandfather came from, and my grandmother was born there, and her family, they emigrated to Canada. He was a weaver and designer of tartans and won prizes from the London School of Design, and so he came to North America to instruct and lead woolen mills in Canada and upstate New York. Now, I don't know the plaid I'm wearing today, but I put this across my shoulder. This is how they'll wear the pin. The plaid will go across the shoulder. But I'll tell you what I have to show you. It's my hat. My hat is a miracle hat. And I wanted so much to share it with you. And it has a feather. It's forest green velvet. And it has a wonderful crest from the MacDonald clan. Now, my grandfather's name was Hendry, which related to the MacNaughton clan. However, my son Samuel informed me this week that the MacNaughtons blend in and join in with the MacDonalds. So it's actually my crest, too. You know, I think the way things go with ancestry, everybody gets to claim a little bit of everything, right? So why not? Well, you cannot see this crest. It's too far away. But what it says in Latin, I will translate into English, on land and on sea. And that was the MacDonalds of the Isle of Skye. And this is where Flora MacDonald is from. Flora MacDonald is a MacDonald from the Isle of Skye. And see her forest green, beautiful outfit? And the story goes that in any of these little historical things I tell you, I'm giving you just a skim top view, but you can look it up. It's a fascinating story. It's so romantic. Flora MacDonald was a young girl lived in the island of Skye. You know, we talked about the Hebrides. If you look at Great Britain as a map, on the northwest corner are this group of islands that go up into the North Sea. And that is the Hebrides, right above Ireland. And that's where St. Columba went, and he was on the little island of Mull, Iona, and has a very famous monastery there. Well, the first island you will always come to, if you leave the mainland, you'll take a boat across, and you come to the Isle of Skye. And then if you go on another boat, you'll go up to Uist, and then you'll go to Harris. You know, you've heard of Harris tweed jackets? That's where it comes from, the sheep from there. And then the top island is Lewis. And that's where a lot of the MacLeods are. Well, the Flora MacDonald story, in just brief, is this. She was asked because there was an uprising of the Jacobites. And the Jacobites were the authentic Scottish people who believed that the throne belonged to them, that they believed that it had been taken by the King of England wrongfully because, you know, Scotland had a throne also. Well, so Bonnie Prince Charlie had been hiding out over in France, and someone came and said, it's time to take the throne. So he came back and had a collection of men, and he was going to go and take the throne. Well, he got support from the Scottish, and they did win a few battles called the Border Wars. But when he got down into England, he could not subdue the king's men. It was too much. So Bonnie Prince Charlie fled. But how was he going to get out? Because they were going to kill him. In those days, there was no question. You usurped the king, off with your head. So they concocted a plan that Flora MacDonald would go on the boat as a young maiden, and they would dress Bonnie Prince Charlie up like her maid. And then they would go out of the Hebrides and sail out to the ocean around Britain and go down and go back to the continent. And do you know that's what happened? It worked. It actually worked. The plan worked. And this picture, you can see, if you look up online, Bonnie Prince Charlie and Flora MacDonald, Flora, you know, beautiful name. That's them. And that's him thanking her on his knee. And it's so beautiful. But the story goes on because, you know, these stories don't just end click, click. Well, then there was a bounty on her head because she had helped a traitor. Oh boy. So she gave in and they took her to London and they put her in the Tower. But finally they let her go back home and they gave her, which was a miracle because they could have chopped her head off. She did this at the risk of her life. But she got back home and she married. And lo and behold, you know, the famous dictionary man, Samuel Johnson from England, you know, in the 1775, 1776s, right in the time of the American Revolution. Well, he was the most famous literary man in England. He literally created the English dictionary. And he's a phenomenal person. He's eccentric, he's unique. He has lots of friends, but he's a whole study in himself. He's a fabulous person. Every great writer that I've ever read in England looks to Samuel Johnson as their hero, including Jane Austen, who was born actually in his lifetime. And she said, there's no one greater than Samuel Johnson. He was admired like C.S. Lewis is admired by many people today, but beyond that, because he literally created a dictionary, which was, it took a genius. He was an absolute genius. Well, Samuel Johnson was in his 60s and he wanted to go to have a little trip out of London. He had lived in London his whole life and attended Oxford and really never gone or traveled. But he wanted to go up to Scotland, to the Hebrides. And so in those days, they had to take mules and they had to take like horses and mules. And he wasn't that young. 60s in those days was really getting up there. And Bosworth, the young man who accompanied him, who wrote his famous definitive biography, has journals. And my son-in-law gave me the book called Samuel Johnson in the Hebrides. Well, lo and behold, I'm reading the book, and here he comes to a beautiful house, an estate, and he meets the Flora MacDonald, and they meet at a gathering and at a party in the Highlands. Is that just something else? And then it talks about his trip, and he describes her, and because he's definitely literary, and you know, Sir Walter Scott, who is a famous Scottish author, right after Jane Austen's time, he admired Jane Austen, but he admired Samuel Johnson. Charles Dickens admired Samuel. I mean, Samuel Johnson is like the person to know. He's worth knowing. But, so, that is the story of Flora MacDonald. And, you know, when I was in Scotland, my mother came and we went to Dumfries, the little town where her mother had been born and lived before they had immigrated to Canada, turn of the century. And so on the very street that my family had lived was Robert Burns' house. Is that incredible? Now, the little man in the town who knew all the history was out. That was his day off, and we didn't get a chance to ask him if there was any kind, how long our family had lived there. We don't know, because, you know, people moved around, and but that was a connection. And Robert Burns' poems are so heartfelt. You know, Auld Lang Syne is attributed to him, and the famous song. And, you know, he's a beautiful soul. That Scotland produced so many beautiful, amazing people. They said in the book I read, 75% of the founding fathers were Scotch-Irish. They had that fierce love of freedom. You know, you saw that in the Braveheart movie, that freedom and the clans and the plaid and the color and the... So, you know, it's all there. It's a wonderful heritage. And so then yesterday, guess what I discovered? I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to tell my tea people. Yesterday is an official holiday also. And guess what it is? It's the National Chocolate Cake Holiday, and it's Mozart's birthday. So I thought, oh my goodness, I have to get a little chocolate cake for my little tea family. And there it is. I went to get it, and it's in a heart because we're getting ready for Valentine's. I wasn't planning to do Valentine's yet, but it's a lovely little raspberry sucre tort. I'll hold it to show you. And you know, Mozart, I think it's made because of his birthday, because chocolate cake is Salzburg, the best chocolate cake you'll ever find. The sucre tort comes from Salzburg, which is his hometown in Austria. So it's very appropriate. So you who like chocolate, it's a nice excuse to be able to have a little piece of chocolate cake. But the secret is, when you have tea, you generally don't need a very big piece because you're drinking the tea, and so you just have a little piece, and it's very satisfying. Isn't that great? I'm gonna have a little more tea here. I think I'm gonna pour a little more because I just feel like I'm so cold today, though it's so gorgeous out. I hope you're having good tea. You know, there's a little shop in Victoria, BC that we always would go to. It's called Murchie's. They have the best tea in the world, honestly. It's the best. And you can buy bulk tea. Well, you know, no one can go to Canada. We haven't gone to Canada now for 2 years, so haven't been able to go. But I have a friend who is ordering tea online from Murchie's. And I'll tell you, there's a wonderful tea there. It's called, I think it was Queen Victoria tea. Then there's a Prince Charles tea. They'll have a special tea now for the Queen's, you know, Royal Jubilee that she's having this year. They always have a new tea, and then they will send you, you can buy a sample packet so you could find out what you like. But their tea is bulk, so you put it, it's loose leaf, make it in a pot, and it's the real thing, you know. Nice to have. So with online, even if we can't go, that was this, we always went to Canada and on the ferry and on the boat, and then we would go, of course, walk through the Empress, and we found a fabulous place, if it does open up again, to have lunch. It's at the Parliament buildings there. That's where their, you know, state, it would be like their province, their capital is right there. And they had the most fabulous dining room. And it's linen and silver and the most delicious food. And it was so reasonably priced, and it was like going back in time. It was the old world service and quality. And then you're in this beautiful dining room that is, their Parliament building is just absolutely gorgeous. And you know, at night it's covered with light bulbs. The whole thing is outlined in lights. And the shocking thing is, this is so shocking, but it's true. They never have replaced those light bulbs in over 100 years. And you know what that tells me? Light bulbs really don't have to run out, do they? But I guess the light bulb company has to make a little money. So we understand, right? Okay, we understand. Well, you know, I know that a lot of you asked me about a nice purse. Well, I thought, okay, I have a little Scottish purse here. And it's really something I've had for a long time. And look what it has for a clasp. It has the walrus tooth. Remember those that they used to use for the duffel coats? My husband had a duffel coat for years, authentic from England, and it had these walrus teeth. Do you remember that? Anyway, this is a fun plaid, and you know, all over the world, you have plaid, and it's endless. The combinations, and you know, I thought this kind of goes nice with this hat, actually. The green family, forest green family. But you know, the plaid, I don't know if I ever told you the story of a little man that I met years ago when I was riding on a bus in Scotland. And he told me that the story of the plaid is the full tartan will have 7 colors, and each clan will have a royal dress, like the royal dress steward, and then they'll have like the hunter tartan. And this would be like a hunter tartan, where it's just more the browns and the greens and the darks. And, but he said that in the olden days, way back, that if a man did a bad deed, like a man committed a crime or something, the punishment, part of it was, they would take away their colors, and they would have to wear the black and white, you know, the lamb, the undyed wool tartan. Now, isn't that interesting? And then to earn them back, they had to be good and reconcile and do what was right, you know, refurbish if they had taken something, and restore, pay their price. So I really don't have any other verification for that story, but I think it sounds authentic. The man was very elderly. He was very, very Scottish, and he knew all the lore and all the stories. And you know, on what they do on Burns Day is, you know, they have haggis. Have you heard of haggis? It's a really different, I don't really think I ever really tasted it. I kind of was afraid to. But they cook it inside skin, animal skin, in the oven. The one thing I did taste, that I was singing up in the Isle of Skye. I was invited to sing at several little churches. Most fascinating experience. They're called kirks, the little kirks. Went way up in the island. I think it was Uist and Uist and Harris I was on. And what they have for their business there, the young men, and they work so hard, was out in the sea working with kelp, and it was so, my goodness, they looked like they worked so hard. Then we went to a little cottage. I was invited, and there was a darling, beautiful woman and her 5 little bairns. They called the children little bairns. And then her husband, he looked so old, but I think it's because he had to work so hard. And they had a peat fire in their little white house. That means they go out and they cut the peat bog into logs. That's what they burn. And then they had the peat roof, because up in those islands, when they get up really far north, not a lot grows, you know, not a lot grows. I had an experience in northern Norway, And I thought it was very similar to the up north Hebrides. It's bleak and barren, and the wind blows, and kind of like the moors, but different than the moors. It's really, really, you have to be strong to live there. And that's why the people that survived there and lived there through the winter and the spring, they're strong people. And they had the kirk. They had the church. And they went to church. They're very strict. They all go to church. They're Presbyterian in Scotland. Now, up in northern Norway, they're Lutheran, but they were also in the olden days. My grandmother told me, and she would have been born in the 1890s, she said, when I was a little girl, my father would go out and he would break the ice with an axe. And we would get in the boat and we would row over to church. We did not miss church because I guess the church was across the fjord. They lived way up in the low floating islands. So, it's the church and the center, that was the center of their life, of their order, of their lawfulness. The pastor was the highest educated. He would be like judge and counselor and helper. And I asked my grandmother, she said, no, they didn't have any police up there. They didn't need them. They were very lawful. They lived lawfully and orderly. Isn't that beautiful? And I think it's the influence of the church that they had in their lives. They worked hard, and they were very, very exact in their cleanliness, if you know what I mean about Norway. They've been ready for the party or the tea party forever. They're ready because my grandmother told me all they did was clean house. And after her mother died, it was very sad. The stepmother would go around with a white glove. So it was very, very strict. Everything was... I have a friend who's Norwegian, and he said, well, they don't believe cleanliness is next to godliness. They believe cleanliness is godliness. So it's a pretty high level of expectation. But, we all need each other, and we all need love. And that's what I've concluded this week so much. I've been pondering and thinking about what makes people happy, what keeps people happy. I know what it is. It's having something to give others of value, and then be able to also receive from others what they want to give to you, helping each other, believing in each other, praying for each other, and cutting each other's slack. Don't be hard on yourself, because if you're hard on yourself, you'll be hard on others. But if you receive God's grace and mercy, and you're kind to yourself, you will be kind to others. And that's a biblical principle, because remember what Jesus said? You can boil all the commandments down to 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength. And then you can love your neighbor as yourself. Isn't that beautiful? It's simple. So always remember, God really wants you to be really happy down deep inside. That's what God wants. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you all, and I think about you. I pray you have a wonderful week. And study a little bit of Robert Burns. Study a little bit about Samuel Johnson. And then study a little bit about Bonnie Prince Charlie and Flora MacDonald. And you will increase your knowledge and connect yourself with wonderful people in history who were just like you. They all wanted good things, and God led their lives. So as we study biographies of good people, we learn a lot, and they become our friends, don't they? Yes. Okay, well, I'm going to move forward with my little tea table so that I can say properly goodbye.